Hi, I'm Catherine.
And I'm Teresa.
And we are the co-authors of the book, Pass the Baton, Empowering All Music Students.
Our goal is to share stories of educators who are passing the baton and empowering their music students. We want to help teachers create music lessons that transform students from passive consumers to vibrant creatives. All right, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for being here. Before we get started with our next guest that we're really excited about, just want to do a quick reminder. If you could subscribe or follow, send a rating or review, any of those things, they really help us get this podcast into the ears of more people and just kind of get the message out there. So we always appreciate any kind of subscribing and reviews and stuff like that. Share with friends, pass it on to colleagues, all of that. So we're really excited today to have Matt Clauhs here. I hope I said it right. Now I'm second guessing myself. We were actually introduced to Matt back episode 9 when Sarah Gulish was with us. She mentioned his work and said, "Oh, you guys have to talk to Matt. You're going to love all the things that he's doing with creativity." So Matt, welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation. And thank you, Sarah, for the recommendation.
Yeah. So we're going to let you introduce yourself, if you wouldn't mind. Tell us a little bit about your background and what you're currently doing in music education.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up outside of Philadelphia in Bucks County, PA. Did my undergraduate at Penn State with Teresa, and completed my master's at UMass Amherst. I was teaching in the Boston public schools during that time, working with high school bands primarily. Then I moved from Boston to Philadelphia, where I started work on my doctorate at Temple University. Most recently, I've moved to Ithaca, New York, where I am now, and I finished my doctorate, wrote my dissertation while living in Ithaca, taught for a few years with elementary school and high school band at a nearby school district, Johnson City, New York. And then this is now my 6th year as an assistant professor, hopefully promoted this year to associate professor at Ithaca College. So I should hear that by February. So I don't know when this comes out, but if it's after February 11th, I might be a tenured associate professor. So fingers crossed for that. But yeah, that's where I'm at most recently. So yeah, mostly working in the public school with again, beginning and advanced bands. But my background is primarily as a jazz saxophone player. So I've been most interested in creativity and improvisation and incorporating that more into my methods across the board, not just in the jazz contexts.
Nice. Wait, so that interest of the creativity, was there, did you just see kind of a reason or a need for it in the bands? Or was it your interest in creativity? What was the why behind that for you?
Sure. I guess just as a musician myself, working in jazz ensembles and creative ensembles, found that to be really rewarding, and thought that all students should really have the opportunity to improvise and create music, not only the students who are in jazz bands. And I worked with a lot of students who played an instrument that wasn't typically found in jazz bands, and they wanted to learn how to improvise. And I just really thought this is not something that should be limited to jazz settings. And really, if you look at our national standards, creativity and the idea of artistic literacy, being to independently create music and perform and respond to music, it really seems that there's this really a charge for music educators to find ways to incorporate creativity in all of their classroom. Even in the 1994 standards, singing with the ones that were the 9 standards, singing alone with others, very repertoire music, improvising and arranging. I can't remember the exact language, but improvisation and arranging were part of those standards too. So they've always really been embedded in our framework. But a lot of research has shown, when they've have done surveys, national and state surveys of teachers, that the creative standards seem to be a struggle for a lot of classroom teachers, and I think especially ensemble directors who are so focused on preparing for a concert that they often feel like they don't have time. Really, many of the band directors I've spoken to said they really want to do creative activities, but they just don't have time to do it. So yeah, a lot of what I've been interested in is how do we create these 5-minute warm-up activities that engage students in improvisation and creativity without needing to not only detract from the concert performance, but I think in a way enhance the concert performance and really begin to open up students' ears and develop their musicianship and their oral skills, so that when they are working and practicing their music at home, they're doing it at a much higher level that hopefully results in some, not that I think it's the goal, but some higher festival ratings and things like that, just because we're building better, more well-rounded musicians, not just people who can recreate, but have something to say on their own as well.
Yeah. I definitely, was shaking my head when you were talking about what the typical ensemble experiences are like. Cause that's what, I was in a great high school band and a great middle school music program, all those things, but I think the first time I really improvised was senior year at Penn State in like a jazz, I can't remember what it was called, but maybe then just jazz improv class. And I was there and I remember being like, I don't know what to do. Tell me what to play, because that was not something, I was very good at playing somebody else's music the way that they told me to play it. And so I think that was true for a lot of us.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the benefits of working with young students, and I've had a few years of working with absolute beginners, is they have no preset notion or preconceived notion of what playing in a band should be. So the most recent fourth grade band I worked with, we started for the first 5 months, no music stands, no method books. We learned everything by ear and with play-alongs and recordings, and they improvised, they composed their own music for the concert, and they all thought that's just what band was. So for them, they're like, oh, that's normal. Yeah, we just make up our own songs. And I'm like, really? Like, to people who hadn't gone through that method was certainly saw that as an exception. But if that's your whole reality, you just go along with it. So there was no pushback. So I had 100 students in that fourth grade band. They were all really on board with it, and I was really lucky to have some great teachers in my school district who were so supportive of me abandoning the method book and really working to develop. I promised them that my goal would be to have all the students playing in tune and in time by the end of their fourth grade. And they're like, hey, if you do that, you can do whatever you like. So that really opened up the door for some creative opportunities and engaging students in improvisation. Because as soon as you're learning songs by ear, it's at least in our program, it just seemed to come naturally. And that's, of course, part of music learning theory is, ultimately leading students toward improvisation through, a very sequential order of events. And we just found our way, not that I was intending it to be a music learning theory curriculum, so much, but that just seemed to be the natural order of the events.
I mean, coming from as a general music teacher myself, like my fourth graders coming to you, like that's what they're used to, right? In the general music classroom, we're doing that stuff all the time. So even that they didn't have a band experience, they also came to you, kind of that way of like, that's what we do. We open up a book and we create stuff with the book, and we just, there is no rules necessarily or path, so yeah, that's awesome to start them off like that.
Yeah, I appreciate you said that. I've told Joanne Rokowski, who, one of the greatest general music pedagogues, music education researchers, and I had her for general music methods, and I've told her a number of times, every time I see her, that I learned more about teaching band from her class than any other class. And had the most fantastic professors in every methods course, everything, but teaching general music was really about how children learn music. So it wasn't about this is a bassoon technique or when you're working with class, but it was this is, when you think about the development of the child's mind, these are things that you need to consider when teaching music. And I just found that to have the greatest impact on how I approach teaching band, which is pretty much what I've mostly taught since, throughout my career. But really reflecting on those general music practices and those general music pedagogues to think about how children learn music, not just say, hey, you need a practice measure 8 through 16 and we'll try that again next week.
Right. Well, and remembering that band or orchestra or whatever is music. I found one school I taught at, the students were required to be in chorus and they were required to play an instrument and go to general music class. So a lot of kids did band, chorus, and a music class. And when the three of us teachers started working together and treating it like music and not the siloed, it was amazing how much more the kids learned because they realized music is music is music, when, we make music, it just happens to be whether we have a trumpet in our hand or we're using our voices or we're playing on a drum or whatever. There's so many similarities. We forget that sometimes when we put ourselves in that little band silo.
Yeah, and I think the more that teachers across content areas can find similar language, and when they start applying labels and terminology, and whether it's counting patterns or solfege, but to use the same system. So when I first introduced songs to my fourth grade band students, we learned them in solfege first because that's what they were using in general music. And then we applied that to, well, when we're in this key, this is what this note is on your instrument and this is how you finger it. But we started with something that was already familiar to them rather than, go through a whole, we're going to now subdivide one E enda, two E enda. And, there's just so much that I think sometimes band directors, and this is something I talk to students at Ithaca College a lot, we just take for granted how long it takes to learn some of these concepts. So if you're looking at the first pages of a lot of method books, there's time signatures, there's note values, there's a music staff, there's posture and breathing and hand position, and there's so many things that a beginning student has to remember. It can be really overwhelming. So let me see if I can get this back to creativity. I think I understand then why a band director is thinking, I have to teach all of these concepts. When do I teach improvisation? I think if we can begin with the instrument and just the instrument and take away, delay some of the notation, we can really get them to learn the instrument by ear first, and then have them create their own songs to find their own voice. And then they want to learn how to write that song down, or they want to learn how to learn more songs using the notes they already know. So I think, part of the creativity piece is really just focusing on the instrument and the child playing the instrument and really connecting with what their goals are, what they want to play, and what they can create, and teaching them that they are a creator of music as well. Mm-hmm. So then when it comes time to read notes, I found things just move a lot faster.
Yeah, to me, it's that build up for the child of building their growth mindset of I can do this, and if there's not so many obstacles in the way, they see success, they see themselves as creative musicians. And then when it's, then you can scaffold in, then, okay, now it's time to look at what these notes look like on paper or whatever it is. Right. But just the building, so we're so much in our mindset is such a big deal. So we come in, if we feel like it's too hard, or there's too many things to look at, a beginner is, they want to give up, or it's too hard, or so I just think it's so nice to start with them and get to know them and let them have a voice so that they then, are seeking out their next steps themselves.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Can you share some examples of what it might look like in an elementary band or any young ensemble?
Yeah. So maybe I'll start with just the very simple and easy to integrate in 5 minutes in a rehearsal, practice session, or a lesson is just simple echo patterns. Again, something that we take from general music is when the teacher can model, and you can start this with a concept if you wanted to model articulation or dynamics or anything, the teacher modeling a 2-measure pattern that the students echo, again, starting on mouthpieces, head joints, etc., eventually the whole instrument. The teacher just modeling that, okay, I play for 2 measures, then you play for 2 measures. And I like to do this with a drum beat. You can just search YouTube for rock drum beat, 110 BPM, and you've got to play along. Or Jamie Aebersold also makes, if you're not familiar with the Play Along improvisation series, incredible tracks that are just B flat major for 3 minutes. It's just fantastic for those introductory exercises. The teacher modeling 2-measure patterns, and then eventually telling the student, okay, I'm going to play something. I want you to play something different. So use the same notes, but put them in a different order, create something you like. You go back and forth, and then eventually having the student lead the class. And I found that it sounds chaotic when you do this in a rehearsal. And I had 100 students, but we would rehearse in sections of 50. So I might have 50 students all playing a 2-measure pattern back. And it sounds crazy, but it only lasts 2 measures, and it's completely anonymous because no one can hear what people are creating. If if your ensemble is so large that you're worried about that, you could do it by sections too. And sometimes in a jazz band, I'd say, okay, I'm going to play, and then I want the saxes to improvise back. I'm going to play when the trombones to improvise back. But giving students kind of that space to try out something near their peers, but without their peers hearing them, was really important to the development, as opposed to just saying, okay, Teresa, play something for the class, giving you that chance to try out the language. So simple echo patterns, again, it was a 5-minute part of every warm-up. In every ensemble I directed, whether I was working with a high-level wind ensemble in a high school. I've even done this with Ithaca College. I worked with their symphonic band. I did as part of my interview, I worked with the college ensemble and had them do it too. Or at any level, you can just obviously change the complexity of the meter or how many notes you're using. But it's a fantastic way just for students to echo their teacher, and then eventually come up with their own response, and then eventually you can have students lead the class in that. So that's just something I love. I call it with my students, follow the leader. So it's kind of like, Simon says, make it a game. So that's just something, my go-to. It's easy to integrate improvisation into any warm-up, and it only takes a couple minutes, and it's a way for a teacher to get to a concept too. So if you want students to understand dynamics, you can model that first, and then invite a student, show us something for us to echo, where they're demonstrating their understanding of dynamics through an improvisation. So a way to connect it to a concept perhaps that you're working on, but without having the students recreate it. And then I think it's more meaningful to them. They have a better understanding, a deeper understanding, I think, if they've had a chance to create something with that as well. So yeah, I guess the follow the leader is my favorite. I've done a lot of things with technology too, and I always worry about that, because I know technology is something that I love to work with. It's very comfortable for me, but I know that's not everyone. And I don't think you need to use technology in order to be creative. It's just how I work with it. But one thing I'd love to do is take those 2-measure patterns and record them, and then have students arrange them in GarageBand to create a band arrangement. So we would record a bunch of 2-measure patterns that students would work together to put that together into a larger piece. I've even done collaborations where I had high school students arranging pieces that were patterns created by 4th grade musicians. So some collaborations across grade level. To create these virtual compositions, and even across region. I think it was 2 years ago, I had Ithaca College students collect these 2-measure patterns created by beginning band students in Arizona, Michigan, and across New York. So we created this countrywide beginning band composition project together that I just thought was really cool. And so technology allows for some of those creative collaborations too. But yeah, I think the more we can get students just incorporating some basic improvisation into their warm-ups, the more likely they are to write a piece for the band or write something for a chamber group. So follow the leaders is my favorite. I'm working on a method to improvisation right now called Connect the Dots. That's in a book that I have with Sarah Goulish's publishing company, Creative Activities for Young Bands. So a quick plug for that, I suppose. But Connect the Dots is an idea of really scaffolding, improvising across chord changes. Because I felt like when I would go to jazz festivals, where primarily you don't go to a lot of concert band festivals where you hear improvisation. So when I go to jazz festivals and hear improvisations, there'd be a student using a blues scale, over a whole chord progression, or a single scale over a set of chord changes, not really demonstrating that they understood the harmony that they were improvising over. So Connect the Dots is basically a way of having students circle chord tones in a chord progression, teaching them how to outline that, circle the chord tones, and then find ways to melodically connect those chord tones to create a line. And we start doing it through like voice leading principles, so finding the nearest chord tone or common chord tone. So the result is a really melodic line over what could be an incredibly complex chord change, but it's very song-like, as opposed to sounding like a technical exercise or just students struggling to really make the changes. So that's something I'm working with right now. But yeah, you can see that Connect the Dots approach in the book with F-flat as well.
Nice.
Sorry, I feel like that was rambling.
No, that was great. So going back to students, like what are direct benefits that you see from kids? I know you've talked a lot about the students, but like Any
Yeah.
things that, you know, really, I guess the benefits from students, things that you see that come out from them, from doing these kind of activities?
Yeah. One of my first years of teaching band, I asked the students to turn in their folders at the end of the year, and one of my clarinet players said, can I make a photocopy of my parts?" And I said, "Sure." I mean, that's illegal, of course, but I was wondering, like, why? Like, or if you're going to play in a band, a community band or a college band, they'll give you new music. And she said, "Oh, I just want to keep playing my instruments." And I thought,
Oh.
wow, I've spent the whole year uh, working with a student and only giving them the skills to be able to play these 10 pieces, let's say, and nothing else. And those 10 pieces don't really make a lot of sense if they're not in the context of a band. So, if you're playing, and I think she was a third clarinet player, so rarely even had the melody, it made me really sad to think the only thing I prepared the student to do beyond my classroom is play the third clarinet part to this Holst piece. And she loves playing music, but that's the only thing I've prepared her to do. So I hoped that through teaching students how to create their own music, and how to learn songs by ear, that they could hear a song on the radio or something on TV and figure it on their instrument, or create something, or figure out ways to work in small groups to just continue playing and not only be able to play, the third clarinet player to Holst suite. So that's, I guess, where really started for me was just this realization. There's also there's a Steve Carell movie called The 40-Year-Old Virgin, where they do kind of a montage of how sad his life is, and one of the thing of how pathetic his life is he's playing the euphonium, walking around his living room playing his marching band drill, and they're like, "Oh, that's so sad and pathetic." And I'm like, "Yeah, but what else? That is probably all he learned how to do." And if music teachers aren't teaching our students how to make music beyond their K-12 school music experiences, then I feel like we're not setting them up for lifelong and life-wide experiences. And I have little confidence that they'll continue to enjoy making music on their instrument beyond their school experience, which is just kind of sad to me. I hope that I would rather us be preparing, troves of amateur musicians who just love playing music and can play. Ithaca is a great scene for that, by the way. We have something called Porch Fest, where everyone in the community goes out on their porch and they just play in these chamber groups, and you walk around and everyone's just making music. And it's, a wide range of levels. Not everyone sounds like a professional, but I mean, we don't need more professional musicians. But I feel like we could always use more lovers of music and people who really appreciate the arts. So, yeah, I feel like if we can get away from preparing our ensembles to be professional ensembles, but instead, and John Cruddas writes about this a lot, of course, with his most recently a return to amateurism in the Music Educators Journal. But the idea of our charge really should be to create amateurs who love music and not professionals who will not likely have an opportunity. There won't be an opportunity for every single one of our students to be a professional musician, of course. But I feel like sometimes we treat our ensemble programs as if we were preparing them for that. We're preparing them to be like ourselves and to go to college to be a music major. And like, we think when they've done that, mission accomplished. We had 5 students go to All States this year, and 3 are majoring in music. It's like, okay, well, what about the other 98% of the students in your ensemble? What about the 70 to 80% of students in the school who don't want to be in the music program? Those are the students I've certainly been most concerned about. And I don't know that I've heard Sarah's interview with you, but I know that's who she's really concerned about too.
Yeah, and that's something that we say a lot too. We want the kids to feel like they're musicians, not just within the 4 walls of our classroom, but when they leave, right? Like, we want them to be musical, not just when we're telling them to. So, yeah. The more we can give them those skills.
Absolutely. And in contrast to that third clarinet player who wanted to play Holst for the rest of her life by herself, I had a 4th grader in Johnson City who I was teaching them how to play, patterns by ear, in B flat on, probably simple echo patterns. And then I asked them to come up with a pattern to share with the class. And she came back and she played something that I wasn't familiar with. Everyone knew. And and someone said, "Oh, she didn't make that. That's from SpongeBob. That's something Squid." Like they were accusing her of like plagiarism, and she was so embarrassed. And she said, "Well, I heard it on TV, and I got my clarinet, and I figured out how to play it. I'm so sorry." I'm like, "No, that's exactly what we want you to do. You're learning this almost like a language. You know, you're hearing something on TV that speaks to you. You figure it out on your instrument, and eventually, you learn how to create your own language with that instrument too." So it was that for me was like a complete, I guess, 180 from my first year of teaching, and the student asking to keep all their parts is a student saying, a 10-year-old saying, "Oh, I was watching TV and I said, oh, I want to learn how to play that, and I figured it out." So that student, I feel like, is more likely going to continue, Teresa, like you said, to continue making music outside of our walls.
Yeah. Well, it's like I had one who we used to have this little event where they could play in the school lobby before, as you know, the kids were coming off the bus. And little fourth grader, first year violin says, "I really want to play the Pink Panther for musical morning." And I was like, okay. And I like kind of paused to take a deep breath to think about like how to go. And she's like, "Oh, it's okay. I learned it last night on YouTube." It's like, oh, okay, that's great. Like and here I was like almost ready to squash her dreams, telling her that it was too hard for a beginning violin student. And she figured it out because she wanted to.
Yeah.
And it wasn't perfect, but it was good. Yeah.
Yeah. I wish that the YouTube resources that are available now, I really wish that I were back in the classroom working with them, because things like Steve Selfridge's Dr. Selfridge Music. I can't remember the name of his YouTube channel, but he has 250,000 subscribers learning to play band instruments on popular songs that they've heard, Star Wars, all these things by ear. And that's exactly what I was trying to do with my students, just doing it myself, like making DVDs for them to do, of me teaching them the songs by ear. So I just absolutely love a lot of the content that is flipping the classroom and teaching students how to play songs they love on their instruments by ear. So yeah, if your listeners aren't familiar with that YouTube channel, please check it out. Your students probably already have.
Yes.
Read all the comments are from 12-year-olds who are saying, "Oh, I wish I had this in my band class," or "Thank you so much, you're a huge help." So it's a great resource.
Yeah, Steve was episode 5 or 6, I can't remember, but he was on here.
Oh, okay.
He's doing great stuff. And yeah, my kids would come in too, like, "Have you ever heard of Dr. Selfridge?" I'm like, "Yes." Should we text him right now and tell him that you like his videos?
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. I'm sure he loves that. I learned about him through my master's students at Ithaca College, because I was teaching a class and we were doing something by ear, and they're like, "Oh yeah, my students love Dr. Selfridge's YouTube page." And he was a doctoral student with me at Temple. I'm like, "I know him, Steve." So we pulled up his page. I took a video of a bunch of New York State music teachers learning to play woodwind instruments to his YouTube channel at Ithaca College, and sent him a video. And of course, like 250,000 of other people have done. But I think, it's just incredible to see what he's done. So
yeah, that's the good stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Kids love it. So, you obviously are giving a lot of advice to your students at Ithaca, but what advice, what would you tell a teacher who's like, "All right, it's time. I need to put some more creative activities in my ensemble." Where should they start?
Oh, yeah. So really to just make very small changes and see how it goes. Let it develop organically. I think I've heard from teachers who just, and I guess this is another way to go, but they just try to like revamp everything, and it's overwhelming, and I worry that could be less successful. So, if your students can be improvising at the first 3 or 4 minutes of every lesson and every rehearsal, you can build from there. Well, really, I'd say start small and model for your students. It's so important at every level for directors to be modeling constantly, and it doesn't always have to be. When I taught high school, I certainly couldn't play every instrument in the high school band as well as my students. So, if you need to model on your own primary instrument for a student, that's fine too. They're hearing a good tone quality, and it's about the melodic ideas and the rhythmic ideas are coming up with anyway. So yeah, modeling for students, always have an instrument on the podium. Because I tell this to the IC students too, you can usually model something on an instrument much faster than you can explain it with words, and it's way more efficient. So talk less, play more, and start small with some just basic echo pattern warm-ups. Just even, I mean, you can even start with just clapping patterns. I clap, you clap. Okay, I clap. Please clap something different. Invite a student leader up just to get students, in that mindset of creating something that's not written on the page, so that they learn to be creative as well as recreative musicians.
Yeah. And I think when we said earlier about when talking to a general music teacher, like going to the person in your building that does general music and just ask, how do kids, improvise, or how do they do warm-ups in your room? Just, there might be something organically there that you can just like, oh, you know how you do this with Mrs. Finch? Well, we're going to try it with our clarinets today, or, you never know. But we have so many resources among each other, and we're sometimes so separated that we don't get those conversations, and there's so much to learn from each other, for sure.
Absolutely.
So how can people connect with you and learn more about your work? Like, how do we get to your book and those kinds of things?
Sure. So I have a website, but it's through Ithaca College. So the easiest thing is probably just to Google Matthew Clauhs. And fortunately, there's only one of me, so it will be the first and only result. And you can, from my faculty website, there's my email address. I'll just say it's mclaws@ithaca.edu. So please feel free to email me and not have to do the Google search. But certainly my website has links to all my publications and things like that. So I'd love to hear from the listeners. And if anyone has, I do from time to time get an email from someone who's tried something out, and it's just great to get that feedback and then continues the cycle. It's important for me to incorporate that with the teachers I'm preparing as well, to know what is and isn't working at in the field.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us. We appreciate it. And it's just always so exciting and like invigorating to hear people are doing and how it's working and all that. So we love it. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for the invitation and for having this podcast as a platform of sharing these ideas. It's really fantastic.
Thanks for joining us. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.
We'd also love for you to consider sharing this podcast with a friend and leaving a positive review. That's one of the best ways to get this message to new listeners.